Hey y'all, I'm Mickey Gousset, and welcome back to another unscripted video, which is pretty much the norm for the channel now. Today's video, we're finally getting to showing you how to do a migration from BitBucket server or BitBucket DataCenter to GitHub Cloud or GitHub Enterprise Managed Users. This is going to work for either. Now, we're not going to walk through all the different options that are available in the tool because a lot of the options are very similar to what you have with the GitHub Enterprise Importer tool, which I have previous videos on, especially things like the post-migration steps when you deal with mannequin users, that kind of thing. But I am going to show you the basics of how you use the version of the GitHub Enterprise Importer tool, GitHub Enterprise Importer tool, or GEI. There's a version of that you use specifically for migrating to BitBucket. And there are a couple of gotchas to watch out for as well. Now, I'm too lazy to make slides. So I'm going to pull up pieces of the documentation as you need to know them to kind of let you understand what's going on. And then we're just going to go through a whole demo of the migration process. All right. Here we go. Like I said, this is unscripted, so we're going to see how far we can even go without even having to make a cut, unless Mickey just really screws something up. So let's switch over to a different view here. And what we've got here, if we blow this up a little bit, maybe. Yep, there we go. What we've got here is BitBucket DataCenter. Now, I've got BitBucket DataCenter just running directly on Docker on my local machine, so I've got a trial version of it running. It's pretty simple to get it up and running. The instructions are out there in multiple places. And what I did is I took a old repository of mine and I loaded it up into BitBucket. And so here's the repository. It's got multiple commits in it. You can see that I've created both an open and a merged or closed pull request against it. For this commit, I've even gone in and added some comments and suggested some changes. I mean, for this pull request, I've gone in and added some comments and suggested some changes. So given that, I want to migrate this repository. So we're going to use the migration tooling that we have for migrating from BitBucket to GitHub to migrate this particular repository. First, let's look at a couple of things in the documentation just to make sure we're all on the same page here. And I'll put the links to all of this documentation in the description below. Also, if you find this video helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like the video, subscribe, share it, all that good stuff so this gets out there to more people. So the top level documentation is right here. And the top level documentation just gives you a link into some of the other documentation that matters. I want to take you to a couple of the different pieces of documentation that I think are most important. The first is under the About Migrations, what is and isn't migrated. So data that is migrated includes the Git source, including commit history, which you would expect, and pull request, including pull request history. Data that is not migrated is all of this. So essentially, when you're migrating from BitBucket DataCenter, you're going to get the code and you're going to get the pull request and the pull request history. Some other things that you want to be aware of are limitations, both on GitHub as well as Enterprise Importer. GitHub has a max commit size of 2 gigabytes and a max file size that you can push of 100 megabytes. Now, when you're using the GitHub Enterprise Importer to migrate from BitBucket to GitHub, you get around that 100 megabyte size limit. You can push files up to 400 megabytes in size. However, if you've got files that are larger than that, then you're going to have to remove them from history. You're going to have to LFS them. You're going to have to do something with them. And then the maximum size of the repository, both the get data and the metadata, can't be more than 40 gigabytes currently. So lots of stuff here for you that you want to make sure you read and understand a little bit before you start the migrations. The next step is we're going to need some access. So we're going to need some access into both GitHub as well as into BitBucket. Now, from a GitHub perspective, there is a migrator role that you can assign to users or to a team, and you could add people to that team and they can do migrations. Or you can be an organizational owner, which gives you the ability to do everything that you're going to do as well. I'm an organizational owner in my organization, so that's what I'm going to use. But if you don't want to grant people organizational owner access, you do have the ability to grant them this migrator role instead. We do outline for you what for the GitHub token that you're going to create, what policies they need, what permissions they need to be able to do this kind of stuff. And then we get to the BitBucket side. Now the BitBucket side is a little more stuff you have to take care of, all right? First off, you need a username and a password of a BitBucket account that is an admin or super admin. That's non-negotiable. You have to have that. Second, you need an SSH key. And so if your BitBucket runs on Linux, you need an SSH key, and it has to follow these specific rules. Can't have a passphrase, and it has to be one of these ciphers. And you need that so that we can FTP the information off of the Linux server to where you're running this tool, so then it can upload the information, the migrated file. And we're going to walk through all of that and see what happens. But those are the two main things that you need. And usually the SSH key is the one that I find a lot of times is the hang up, because people don't want to give you that SSH key that gets you directly into the server itself. But you're going to need it in order to make this work. All right. So, and I've already done a couple of things ahead of time, right? I've already created my SSH key. So I've created an SSH key following these rules. I uploaded the public key into BitBucket, and then I have my private key, and I tested it, and that all seemed to work. I've also already created a personal access token inside of GitHub, which I assume you know how to do, which is well, I'll just show you real quick. So if we go to github.com/mickeygousseorg3. And let's blow this up a little bit. If we go to settings, and then you scroll down on the left-hand side, and you go to developer settings, you go to personal access tokens. I created a classic token. I think you could use fine-grained as well. But you can see I just came in here, I created a classic token, and I granted it admin, org, repo, and workflow. Keep in mind, if you're doing this against an EMU or an enterprise cloud that you have SSO configured, you'll also want to click in here and enable it against the organization that you're trying to migrate to, so that the token then has the SSO that it needs to be able to authenticate. All right. So what's really helpful though, and this is kind of what we're going to walk through, is this final migration tab right here, which is migrating repositories from BitBucket server to GitHub Enterprise. It walks you through all of the steps that you're supposed to follow, right? It tells you to, so the first step that we need, and we're going to go through all these, but essentially there's a specific extension that you install for the GitHub CLI called BBS to GH. And that is the GitHub Enterprise Importer version that allows you to migrate from BitBucket to GitHub. So what we're going to do is we're going to install that extension. I've already got it installed, but I'm going to show you, how you would install it. There's some environment variables that we have to set up. So we have to set up the personal access token. We have to set up our BBS username and BBS password. And then there's a bunch of other things. If you're, then we have to have a place to store this file. So the thing is, we're going to generate this file from BitBucket, and it's going to download the file. It's going to create this file, but we've got to store it somewhere for GitHub to access so that it can actually pull it in and migrate it. It used to be you had to use blob storage either in AWS or Azure. That also then requires you to make sure that you've opened up the firewall rules on that storage to allow GitHub to access it, which can also sometimes be difficult to get done in your organization. So what we've done is we've added the ability now for you to use GitHub owned storage. So it's just a flag that we'll add that says, hey, instead of using your AWS or your Azure, use our GitHub storage, which is secure storage just for you, that you can use to store the migration file. And then we're going to run the migration and we're going to see what happens. Now we're going to migrate just one repo right now. So we're going to jump over to demo and actually start migrating one repo right now. There is an option, ability to migrate multiple repositories if you wanted to, but we're going to queue up one repo for this particular video. Now, to get all this started, you have to have the GitHub CLI installed. So if we do a gh-help, you can see that I have the GitHub CLI installed. Now, in order to migrate, you have to have the BBS to GH extension installed in your CLI. And you can simply do that by saying gh extension install GitHub/gh-bbs to gh. And that will install the extension. That's what I ran to install the extension earlier. So that's the first step you have to do. The next step is you have to set these three environment variables. Now I already have them set. I'm not going to reset them for you because I don't want you to see my values. But I've created a personal access token for GitHub and set this value. I've set the BBS username value. I've set the BBS password value. If you're doing this on Windows, then here's how you would do it from a PowerShell perspective. Now, I want to make sure that the extension is working correctly. All right. So if I do a gh-bbs to gh-help, then you can see we get the help back for this extension. It looks very similar to the help that we saw in the other GEI videos I've done, but it's got a couple of things that are different when you get into some of the specific commands. Also, I forgot to tell you, if you do run that GH extension install and it fails, it's probably because you're not authenticated. So if you've just installed the CLI, before you can install an extension, you'll need to do a GH auth login. And then it will walk you through authenticating to your GitHub Enterprise. So the extension's working. This looks good. We've set up the what am I trying to say? What did we set up? Oh, we set up the environment variables. So now it's time to actually migrate a repository. So here's the command. Let me find the command that we're going to do. I like to do it all on one line. Give me a second here. Let me get this set correctly because I made a change earlier. And here's the command that we're going to run. I hope. Let's see. No, here's the command we're going to run. All right. So let me pull this. Let me put this in the. So ultimately, what we're going to do is we're going to do a gh bbs to gh migrate repo command. And if we do a --help on this, you're going to see there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can pass in. And the documentation walks you through some of these different things that you'll need. But we're going to skip all of this AWS stuff and such because we're going to actually use the GitHub storage for this. So here's the command we're going to run. And let's see, do we have anything in here right now? Yeah, so we're going to get rid of all these log files so that we've got things clean. and we're going to run this command. Now, let's look at what this command actually does. Do I not have my cursor? There we go, that's better. By the way, I just got a Mac. I haven't used a Mac in ever, so I'm getting used to it. All right, so we're going to run gh bbs to gh migrate repo. We're going to give it the server, the BitBucket server, which in my case is just localhost 7990. We're going to give it the BBS project, which was called MIF for my first project. We're going to give it the BitBucket repo, which the BitBucket repo was called Conference Talks. Then we're going to specify where we want it to migrate to. So we're migrating to, that's not the right org, we're migrating to, make you say org 3. Okay, that's weird, but okay. We're migrating to, make you say org 3. We're migrating to the repo that we want to create is going to be called Conference Talk. So we're going to give it the same name. We're giving it my SSH username and my private key so that it can grab the file off the BitBucket server once it's done. And then we're telling it to use GitHub storage. So what should happen here is we export the information from BitBucket server, grab that file, still on the BitBucket server, pull it local to my laptop, push that file up to GitHub storage, and then the GitHub migration APIs will grab that file and start the migration process. So let's see what happens when we do this. So it says I'm running an update version of the extension. It's running the export. This could take, depending on the size of your repository, and not just code size, but also how much metadata, it can take a while to run. This is a small repository, so you can see it already failed or already completed, but something happened. So the export completed, and it's showing you that my migration archive is located in my BitBucket shared home data migration export, BitBucket export to .tar, but it couldn't download it. So that means something happened trying to automatically get it off of the server itself. All right, and if we look, you'll see we have a log. So if we do a cat on that log, then we can see something happened. The connection got refused. Okay, fine. I may not have something set up right on my BitBucket server, somewhere in my networking, whatever. So the file, though, is still out there on my BitBucket server. So I can go grab that file, right? So what I'm going to do in this case, since I'm on Docker, or since I'm running on my local machine with Docker, I can just come out here and say, okay, let's run this command, which is basically I'm just going to do a Docker copy. So let's clear this out. So I'm going to do a Docker copy. I'm going to go to that location where it told me the file is, the export file 2 is, and I'm going to copy it into the repository that I'm currently in. Boom, successfully copied. And of course, if I do it, we can see that there is the file. All right, so I'm going to remove these log files. Every time you run gh bbs to gh, it creates a log file. So these log files can build up. So I like to keep it kind of clean when I'm doing my demos. But there is my tar file. That is my actual migration file that's going to that I want to get loaded up. So now I need to run. Where is it? This command, but it's going to look very similar. But The main difference is we're saying migrate repo. We're still doing the BBS to GH migrate repo. But since I have the archive file, I've added a switch --archive-path. And I've said, here is my file. And because I've added this switch, it's not going to try to export again. Instead, it's just going to try to upload that file. And then I give it the same information I gave it before: the GitHub org, the GitHub repo, the BBS server URL, the BBS project name, the repo name. I have to give it all of this BitBucket stuff, even though I'm not actually going to BitBucket to do anything. And then use GitHub storage. So now this is going to kick off the actual migration. So what's going to happen is nothing. Well, that's embarrassing. Oh, I've got the file name wrong. That's why. So let's try this again. Let's come back here. Let's change the file name to be the correct file name, which was 2. So there you go. So you can see that it is uploading to GitHub owned storage, which is storage that only I can access. It's created me some storage that's only accessible by me. And it's going to upload these files, and then it's going to start the migration process. And I will probably cut the video once it gets to the migration process, because that can take a couple of minutes, and you don't just want to sit here and watch this thing run for a couple of minutes. All right, so it's finished uploading the archive. Now it started the import process. Now that is the most important thing you could have. That is your migration ID. So if something happens, if the migration fails, that is what can be used to try to get more information about why the migration failed. So if you open up a GitHub support ticket, that's what you would want to include in that support ticket. If you're working like with my team, the Fast Track team, or GitHub Export Services, or a partner for your migration, that is the ID you want to give them so that they can look into the system and maybe determine why the migration actually failed. All right, so this is going to take a couple of minutes to run. So with the magic of editing, we'll be back in just a moment. So while this is running, a couple of things. You can queue up multiple repos at the same time if you don't want to sit and watch them run individually. There's a queue only command you can run, and then you can take this RM number, and there's another command that you can run that will return the status and let you watch the status. Now, I don't recommend that you queue up hundreds of repositories at once, because they're not going to all migrate at once. So the maximum amount you can have migrating concurrently at any one time is, I believe, 10 or so. And there is a maximum global amount that could be migrating at any one time. So loading up hundreds of repositories at once to migrate isn't going to make things run any faster. Instead, what you should be doing is loading up your repositories that are logical groups that need to migrate at the same time. So if you've got 5 or 6 repos that need to migrate as a logical group, you load all those up and let them migrate. But please, please, please do not load up hundreds or even thousands of repos at once to try to migrate, because it's not going to make it go any faster. So this is still running, but if we come over here and look in our organization, so if we go to github.com/mickey-org3, you can see it has created the repository, and it's slowly loading things up into the repo. So it's making progress. And if we come back and look, then you can see that it completed successfully. We did get a warning during the migration. We can download the migration logs from here if we want to. If we look, we can see that there's also the verbose logs there. So if we do a cat 2025 29 verbose, then here's all the verbose details of the migration process. But you don't really have to dive into all of that because the repository is migrated successfully. So just like with our Enterprise Importer repositories, if you go into the repository itself, we get an issue. And in that issue is the migration log. And here we can see basically the warning is forking's not allowed. So we couldn't enable forking automatically in this repository. But otherwise, everything seemed to migrate successfully. If we come back to the code tab, we can see there's my 23 commits. There's my open pull request. There's my closed pull request. If we go into the pull request itself, we can see there's the comments that we saw earlier. And there you go. We have now successfully migrated a repository from BitBucket DataCenter to GitHub. Now there's some post steps you'll need to take. Again, I've got videos on this. Like for example, you'll want to reclaim the mannequin users here so that they point to your actual GitHub users. You'll probably need to, if you're going to continue to use a non-GitHub Actions workflow system, you'll need to probably link that workflow system up. Or if you're migrating to GitHub Actions, you'll need to make sure you've created the appropriate GitHub Action workflows that will work with your repository. And if we do a GH BBS to GH help, you'll notice we also give you something like an inventory report. So you can run an inventory report that can be helpful when you're planning your live migrations. And if you want to migrate multiple repos, we can even generate a cross-platform PowerShell script that can help you in migrating multiple repos as well. All right. So let's go back over here. And there you go. That is the basics of how you migrate. It's very, very similar, as you can see, to the GitHub Enterprise Importer for migrating from, say, GitHub Enterprise Server or GitHub Enterprise Cloud to EMU. It's a different extension with a couple of things to keep in mind, such as the fact that you'll need an SSH key, and you'll need a BitBucket admin user. But that's how you do it. So I'm interested to see how you do. So let me know if you try this out. Let me know if you've got questions. Let me know if there's specific questions or concerns you have with this, and I will do my best to try to answer them in a video. I'd love some feedback. I'd also like to know if you liked this video, if you found it helpful. If you did, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Again, trying to build the channel. I've been away for a couple of months, but now I'm back. So I've got more content I'm building, but let me know what you think of this. And finally, the last thing I'd be interested to know is, do you want more unscripted content like this, which is quicker for me to make, but again, you see all the bugs and errors and when I don't remember exactly what I want to say? Or are you wanting to see more polished content? Polished content takes a lot longer to build. That's with slides and edits and all that kind of stuff. I kind of like the unscripted because honestly, it's a little easier on me, but I need to know if you find that helpful or not. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.